What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the second episode of the comic Sanctorium. I'm your ever gracious host, the master of the comic arts, Emilio Marty. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about my favorite character in all of comic book history and almost in just about any kind of pop culture history, Dr. Stephen motherfucking Strange. The reason I love him is just one, he's just such a badass. So we're going to be going into a little bit of different things today. We're going to talk about his history, his origin stories, where he started from, who actually created him, and really just kind of give you a big overview for the people who don't know who he is. He's got another movie coming out, and it's going to actually start filming soon, so I really wanted to bring that to you, and let's kind of get a better idea for you, the fans of those movies and who want to be fans of the comic books, to really understand who he is and where he's going, and the direction that, this series and everything's leading. So just right off the bat, as we know, Doctor Strange is from the Marvel Universe. He was originally created by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee in 1963. In July of 1963, actually, in the back issue of Strange Tales 110 or 110, however you want to say it, was released. And the story is kind of a cool story, because normally when you get an origin story or a first appearance of a character, a lot of the times you kind of get an origin story of who they are and where they came from, how they got their powers. We all know Spider-Man and Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider. So with that, he ends up being Spider-Man. But with this, it's a little bit different, just because his first appearance, like I said, was in the back of a Strange Tales 110, and it's a completely different storyline. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual storyline of the Human Torch or anything really that was particular with that story. He actually had his own individual first off run, which coincided with the actual comic, with his beginnings. So the story goes like this. Just so if you don't feel like reading it, and I definitely always recommend reading the comic books. I can only tell you so much, but you seeing the actual issue is gonna really sell it for yourself. So in the beginning, you have Doctor Strange is in the Sanctum Sanctorium, and yes, this comic cast and nerdcast, whatever you want to call it, is based off of that. So he's in the Sanctum Sanctorium, and a guy comes to his door who's saying that he's having nightmares and he's being haunted and he can't sleep due to him thinking that he murdered someone. While he's in that kind of dream world, he's being attacked also at the same time. So he's having trouble sleeping, which is essentially affecting his day-to-day life and ruining his life. So he's tried a bunch of different cures and therapies and everything, and nothing seems to work. So he's on his last limb and turns to Stephen Strange. Now Stephen Strange says, "This is a little bit weird, but let me see what I can do." And he uses the Eye of Agamotto, which we'll get into a little bit later. And he uses the Eye of Agamotto to actually open up the truth of what's going on, and nothing really kind of comes to. So he goes into his astral projection form and enters the guy's mind. Now, similar to the movie, if you guys have seen it, when his astral projection form is actually out in the world, that's when the Ancient One hits him with that quick little body shot and knocks him around. His physical body is actually vulnerable, so it's almost like a dead body, but his spirit is just kind of traveling. Like I said, we'll get into all of that later. But while he's investigating in this guy's mind, he finds out that he's being overrun and attacked and manipulated by the one and only Nightmare, who is, in my opinion, probably one of my favorite actual Doctor Strange villains. He's a guy who literally is what his name is. He's nightmares. He is your worst fears come to life. Very, very similar to Scarecrow from the Batman universe, but instead of Scarecrow inducing fear through gases or poisons, This guy literally is your nightmares. He lives in the dream realm and the dream universe and everything like that, and he controls you. And he's so OP of an actual villain. He actually was able to keep the Hulk awake for multiple days in Hulk form, and almost manipulated him into a way where he was just destroying cities and towns, and ended up becoming like almost a bad guy. But it was all just because Nightmare was really making him do that, per se. So while he's fighting Nightmare in this random guy's dream, the guy is actually being controlled still, and pulls a gun on Doctor Strange's physical body. And right in the nick of time, the Eye of Agamotto actually shines a light, wakes Doctor Strange's body, and his astral projection is pulled back into his body. And in the last minutes, like comic books always do, he saves himself and saves the day. Reveals to this man that he was actually a criminal, and that's why he's having these nightmares, because he was also being controlled by Nightmare, and he had guilt of, all the crime that he had portrayed and done. So, like I said earlier, as an introduction to who this man is, you kind of get a little bit cooler of a story, in my opinion, than the actual origin story. And it's just a little bit different because like I said, you're getting a different perspective of just right off the jump. You kind of see this guy and he's awesome. He can leave his body and enter people's minds. He has this necklace almost kind of thing that literally can almost alarm clock him and wake him up where he's different realms and magic is just predominant. And it was really kind of cool to see certain things like that come up. And we're talking, like I said, 1963. You don't really have a lot of villains or superheroes in the realm of comics that were coming out and doing very similar things. Now, there's a lot of different comic book characters to date now that have a lot of similar attributes of being a master of mystic arts or sorcery, magic, or whatever it is. You have Zatanna, who was one of my favorite from the DC leagues. You have Dr. Fate as well, Constantine. You have Brother Voodoo from the Marvel Universe, and Brother Voodoo is actually one of Doctor Strange's best friends, I should say, just because a lot of the times they're always working together and they understand the world of sorcery. And if you like to hear more about Brother Voodoo, please comment below, and I will definitely give you guys a history of Brother Voodoo, because he is a badass character who, in my opinion, should have his own series, because I think it could sell very well, especially if we did it in a way of almost American Horror Story, the Louisiana one, where you had a lot of that voodoo kind of magic coming in. I would love to see a comic reference series about him, because I think he's very underlooked, as well as a lot of the other characters that I love. And trust me, guys, you'll get a lot of different adaptations and a lot of stories and people that I think should have their own series throughout the rest of these casts and episodes. And so definitely keep forward. So with that being said, later on, from 1963 in July up until December of 1963, Doctor Strange actually made one or two small appearances, but in Doctor Strange's, or Strange Tales 115 or 115, however you want to say it, Doctor Strange actually finally gets, boom, his origin story, how he became Stephen Strange. And a lot of the comic references were very similar to the actual movie. They had a lot of the same things. He was an arrogant surgeon who only performed tricky and hard surgeries or things that were going to promote him and make him more money. He was very misogynistic and very egotistical and just all about myself, who I am, and I want this, that, and the other, and I want money. And it actually states that in issues that he's turned down clients because not the surgery was too hard, but the fact that it was actually, they didn't have enough money to be able to afford how much he wanted to charge, so he's turned them away because he was always greedy about money. So, like in the movie Into the Comic Origins, he's driving down in his beautiful sports car. It actually ends up being a Corvette at that time. So, if you know cars, guys, the 1960s style Corvette is literally one of the most beautiful cars ever manufactured. And I'm not an American muscle car kind of person. I love import. But the 1963 Corvette is literally one of the sexiest cars I've ever seen in my life. And he's got the cherry red, and it's just perfect. So he's driving down on the side of a cliff, and like I said, like the match of the movie, he drives off of the cliff because he's distracted, crushing both of his hands, and his entire surgery and medical career is basically over. He uses all of his wealth and fame and fortune throughout the years upon years of him studying and being a surgeon to actually go out and try every procedure around the world. Spends every last dollar he has. While traveling through New York, he hears about a guru who's putting on a seminar in the city who is he's just trying to help the world and make the world almost like, I can heal you, I can do this and do this, and he's healing people on stage, kind of like that, like weird, like, oh, let the powers be gone from your spirit kind of magic, and like, you know, the super Christians and Catholics, you know, do. And so he goes to one of these and he tries to talk to what ends up being Yao, the Ancient One. And he's sitting there talking to him, and he just says, I can help you, I can fix your hands, but you have to come to me. I'm in Carmartage. So he leaves, the seminar's over, Doctor Strange is upset, he scrapes up every last dollar that he can find together to get himself to Carmartage, and while he's walking through the Himalayan mountains, he actually ends up getting lost and just about dying from a blizzard and being frozen, starving, and all those other factors, when magically he ends up being right at the footsteps of a cave with a light. So he runs in trying to just save himself and finds out that he found Carmartage and he found the Ancient One, who is the guru who's coming, he's trying to get his hands fixed. So he turns to him and says, please fix my hands. I need them. I need to go back. And Yao actually turns him down and says, if I'm going to fix your hands, the only way I'm going to do it is if you abandon your concepts of science and medical and understand that magic is real. Well, Doctor Strange and Stephen Strange have been literally studying medical for so long that he ended up pushing it away and saying, no, you can't fix me, I already know it, I disprove you. While walking through a hallway, he comes across Baron Mordo, who is actually having a conversation with the one and only all-powerful evil magic and sorcerer Dormammu. And he actually sees that Doctor Strange is catching him, so he puts a spell on Doctor Strange his mouth so he can't turn to the Ancient One or anybody to relay what he has said. It looks like a metal cover of his mouth, but it's invisible. Only Baron Mordo would be able to see it or anything like that. It's almost like a steel trap to him, so nobody can see what they're saying or anything like that. But what's kind of cool is the Ancient One, being all-knowing, all-powerful, and being the current, at that time, Sorcerer Supreme, already knew that Dormammu and Baron Mordo were in coordinates. They were working together. I'm really not good with words like that. So when they were working together, the Ancient One thwarts that fight and stops Baron Mordo and banishes him, and that's where you get Baron Mordo to Doctor Strange, because he is holding that grudge, saying that you turned to him and that you got me caught so I couldn't succeed in my plan, and now they're always villain. He's his number one villain to him. He's the Joker to his Batman, and the Red Skull to his Cap, if we want to keep it a Marvel reference. So it's kind of just different to see, like, from where we started in July of 1963, where you have this person who's a master and already the Sorcerer Supreme, to a person later on, 5 issues later in December, saying, like, all right, I'm going to show you from the rough get. So he ends up studying at Carmartage with the Ancient One and becoming the new Sorcerer Supreme, Master of the Mystic Arts. Now, with that being said, when his first debut actually started coming out, they didn't actually call him the Master of the Mystic Arts. He was actually classified as the Master of Black Magic, which is funny because in current runs and more modern storylines of Doctor Strange, it's revered that he doesn't use black magic. Black magic is always classified as more of an evil kind of magic, while light magic is good. But being that he is the Sorcerer Supreme, he is actually mastered in all kinds of magic, in all types of sorcery. So he is a phenomenal magic user. He's super powerful, and in my opinion, he always dumbs his power down to match to a level where it's almost like an equal fight. And his genius level intellect actually puts him on a higher standard, so he doesn't have to use all of his magic all the time, because of the fact that he can outsmart most of his actual villains. We all saw throughout the movie where he goes to the Dark Dimension and makes a deal with Dormammu and says, Dormammu, I have a deal. Dormammu, I came to make a deal. And he outsmarted him before he even went in, because he understood that Dormammu is more powerful than him at that time, so he has to use his genius level intellect. Well, while with that movie, it was so good of a concept to see him do things like that, because that's exactly how they're written. And if you watched my first episode, I'm always all about keeping the comic accuracy, from cartoon to comic to any other reference of who they are. It's all about the accuracy of how you transcribe them to be on another plane. So to see him actually go in, the only way that he could beat Dormammu at the time was to outwit him, was a great setup to me. So big props to the movie, guys. Don't get me wrong, I do love the movie very, very well. There were issues that I had going into the movie that I had read about, but I understood why they made certain choices. They had certain costume designs that I wasn't initially a fan of, because I wanted to see that more comic, like the classic almost button-up pirate shirt with the skin-tight leggings and the big old flappy cloak of levitation. But in all honesty, I don't have a problem with the actual movie nowadays, because I look at it and go, you know what, it is kind of cool that they threw in that little Tibetan monk style and almost like a martial arts gi for him instead of just his regular classic outfit. I would have loved to see the more classic outfit, but in the little snippet of Thor coming to New York for the Avengers movies and the other Thor movie, you kind of get to see him at least wearing the yellow gloves, and you see that more classic Doctor Strange, where he's now left the concept of being in Tibetan and Carmartage, and he kind of modernized to that New York City style. Because let's face it, although he abandoned his idealisms of, being a misogynistic, money-hungry surgeon, he still wants to be the top of the fashion, and he always is actually able to change his clothing at will to match the top fashion. And he fits in with that New York style fashion, because I'm from the East Coast, so I understand when I go to New York, I understand that almost everyone there is going to be trying to outdress each other, and that's kind of what he does. So it's kind of cool to see that. So, like I said, that's what's really good about the movie, and it's a great introduction. The only real big issue that I had with it is the next movie that's coming out is supposed to be about Nightmare And then the first movie was all about Dormammu and the Time Stone. And in my opinion, I just think that those movies should be flopped. I think the first movie should have been with Nightmare, and I think you could have almost done the same storyline and just replaced Dormammu with Nightmare. The reason I say that is Dormammu is just an all-powerful and super strong villain. And a lot of times you see him as the introduction character for Doctor Strange because he's one of the biggest people that he fights. But for me, I think it's too much too soon, because Dormammu is not just a person who lives in the dark dimension. Dormammu is the dark dimension. He is an entire dimension of dark magic and sorcery and mystics that he controls at a whim. If you live in the dark dimension, you essentially are from Dormammu, and you are from his actual being. He owns that entire dimension. So it was a little bit too soon, and I think you could have rewritten it completely and kept the same person. You could have even kept a lot of the storyline and just replaced him with Nightmare, because to me, I think it would have been a little bit softer of an introduction with still a big bad villain who's a badass villain. Like I said earlier, he's one of my favorites. He haunts your nightmares. He lives in your dreams. He controls the dreams that you have at his whim. So I would have preferred to see him first, but I understand where we're going, and I understand the direction that they needed to go. So that's why I can't be too mad, because I still watch the movie. I still religiously love all of those Avengers movies and the Marvel cinematographic universe. But it would have been nicer. From my personal Doctor Strange fan style love, I would have loved to see him actually be Nightmare, not Dormammu. But you win some, you lose some. Excuse me. So I want to kind of get into a little bit about his abilities and stuff like that, because there's a lot of things that people just don't really understand. With him being so powerful, and with his abilities of being able to actually go out and manipulate universes and time and all of these other things at his will, he does draw his power through magic. So with that being said, in a more modern storyline, there's a scientific universe that actually comes, or a scientific world, I should say, that comes across the universes and destroys all magic and all magical things that sorcerers and mystics are actually able to pull their magic from and draw power from. With that being said, then it leaves him with almost no magic, and you get to see him on a more raw kind of standard. Now, Doctor Strange is actually a great hand-to-hand combat person. He is able to actually hold his own against a lot of just the low level, petty thugs that, we see all the time, especially throughout like Spider-Man. Spider-Man's always stopping the little like criminals. And then you can see him hold his own against people like his ward his name is Wong, and he is his trusty servant and partner. In the movie, it was the heavier set guy who was leading who was in charge of the library at Carmitage. But in the actual storylines, he's just almost like his butler. But Wong is a phenomenal hand-to-hand combatter, and he's actually been able to fight off some of the best martial artists throughout all of Marvel when they tried to come into the Sanctorium, and he's able to actually hold his own against them because of his hand-to-hand skills. So being that he can hold his own against amazing kung fu and martial artists, Doctor Strange is trained with Wong and is on an equal level. And it's kind of cool because you don't really get to see that side of him because he always relies on his magic. So when the more recent run just came out where he actually got all of his magic taken away and he had to rely on nothing but his brute strength and his hand-to-hand combat, you get to see him. There's issues where he's literally holding a battle axe that's chopping demons and monsters' heads off and cutting them into pieces and sending them back to the dark dimension through the little bit of magic and portals that he has, or beating them up like they're common thugs just to get information to figure out how to, be able to send everybody back at the same time. So it's kind of really a awesome way to see how he actually ended up, how his power and strength is actually played out, opposed to his all magic and his all sorcery control. Like I said earlier, he can control black magic, white magic, or light magic, dark magic, light magic, however you want to say it. All sorcery or anything that is magical, he can control at his will. He is revealed within all of infinity and death and all of those cosmic beings, and he can rely on cosmic power. His power is actually so great that at one point he took a full frontal blast by Galactus and was able to take it and redirect it back to Galactus and knock Galactus actually on his ass. And not a lot of people who ever face Galactus even get away from Galactus. Not a lot of people live to see Galactus and live to see another day. So to be able to go take a full blast from him and redirect it back and put him down in one hit is extremely impressive. He's fought off some of the strongest sorcerers and magical beings and characters throughout all of Marvel, and to me that's what's really just interesting. That's why I love him, because at any point he could always come up against someone who's more magically inclined, but because he's outsmarting them, he's also so strong that he can draw on their own magic and use their power against them, and that's what's really cool. So I've mentioned a bunch of times too that he is a genius level intellect. He graduated top of his class in all of his medical studies and everything like that. He actually became a surgeon, I think it's 2 years early than actually him. Maybe it's only a year, but he graduated early throughout medical school. Now, I don't know how to be a surgeon. I don't know anything about medical school, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But to me, I have friends who are studying to be doctors, and I look at their textbooks and I go, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Oh yeah, no, that's too much to learn. So to me, I think it's very impressive to be able to go and say, all right, I'm going to memorize all of this and actually just go and be able to apply it and do so well that you can graduate medical school early at the top of your classes. It's just impressive. I get it. It's a comic book. It's not real. But to me, he's real. So fuck you. So also other things that he can use is he has these Eye of Agamotto. Like I said, I was gonna mention it later. Here's that time. So the Eye of Agamotto is the all-seeing truth. It's the eye that you saw where the time stone was. But it's more than just, in the movie they make it basically just a necklace that holds the time stone, and it's really not that. And this is one of the problems I actually had, where they kind of dumb that amulet down. So like I said, it's an amulet that is all-seeing truth. It literally shines a light so bright that it shows the truth in anything. It can detect if you're lying. It can detect if you've stepped somewhere and you had to move, or if you actually ended up having to do something else and you need to track someone. It helps you track. It helps you do really anything that you can call upon it. It will really help you do. And in multiple occasions where he fights Dracula, he actually uses it to release humans from the spell that Dracula's put them on. He uses it in his original appearance. He uses it to actually bring his body out of the astral form into his his physical body to actually save himself. It helps him, and it almost has a mind of its own, and it is, in my opinion, the most powerful weapon in his arsenal, and that's why I kind of brought it up first. There is also an orb of Agamotto, which is essentially just a bigger version of the eye, but he can use it to see around the world and spy on anything around in the entire universe, anything that's going on. He can use it to actually contact other beings and people around the world and be able to talk to them. So it's just kind of like an OP, almost like a cell phone in modern days. He can literally Google anything and be like, no, you're lying here, bro. But in essence, it's just a bigger version of the Eye of Agamotto. Now, in the movie, you got to see a great rendition of the Cloak of Levitation, which was a beautiful cloak. And it essentially just is what it says it is. It's a cape, cloak, however you want to call it, and it helps him levitate. Not fly, levitate. There is a huge difference, and for those who you guys don't know, flying, you can essentially go at top speeds or anything like that. His cloak of levitation just helps him get out of the way, fly around, like float around, I should say, and just kind of move at easy accessibility. He's not Superman when he puts it on. He can't fly around the world as fast as he can. If he wants to get around the world as fast as he can go through the astral projection and literally use that and go fly through the earth without any damage to him. He just leaves his physical body, and on multiple occasions he's done that. He's gone to South Carolina to a college where there was demons that were taking over the school and infecting people, and he used his astral projection while he was on the airplane flying from New York City to South Carolina to actually end up going spy out what was going on. And then as soon as he landed, he went back into his body and then went down to the college and actually, helped save the day and release everybody, which is, like I said, it's kind of just a cool thing. He can use teleportation, and he can also open up dimensional rifts. So a lot of the times, to throw people off balance, he throws you into a different dimension where he has been before, and you're gonna, where up is down and down is up. So you're all mixed up with how your body's going and which way you're going. So he understands when he puts you in this dimension that you're not gonna know where you are or how your body's gonna move, but he does, because he's done it and been there before. So he can always do stuff like that. And the age-old question is, well, if he can do all of these things, then why didn't he just take Thanos' arm and cut it off and blah blah blah? And the reason for it is, guys, it doesn't make a good movie that way. Because if that was the case, then Doctor Strange could have came out and said, all right, this is this, and I'm just going to cut your arm off. Now I have all the Infinity Stones. And now you have this long movie that was amazing, cut down to almost the first couple minutes, almost like when Thor goes in and cuts his head off when he's on his planet. It doesn't make for a good movie if you make it him to is all powerful. Because at that being said, we could have also had the Infinity Gauntlet doing more power and showing more power and everything like that, and we could have also had everybody step up also. Thor Stormbreaker was amazing in that movie, and we could have also showed him, being so much stronger than he actually was portrayed, or X, Y, Z. It doesn't make for a good movie, guys. We have to play for that crowd that's going to go back and see it. I can write you the issue. I can say, okay, here goes. He puts him in a different dimension, cuts his body parts across, blah, blah, blah. He also isn't that kind of person, though. So you got to think about that character. He's not the person who's going to sit here and say, okay, I'm just going to do this vindictively and maliciously. I'm going to do this smart. This is how I'm going to look about it. And what was great about the two movies between Infinity War and Endgame is he looked through every dimension and every possibility, and there was one that actually worked out. And the one that worked out was the one that they followed. And yes, we lost Tony Stark, rest in peace. And we get that, but that was how he said. He was like, we need to do things perfectly this way or else nothing will work. And that's why he outsmarted, and he knew ahead of the end game that was the storyline we were going to play out, and that was the universe we were going to play out. Other things that he can draw power on is the Wanda Watum. Wanda Watum is basically just it's like a stick with a wooden stick with a skull on the top of it. It's just an all-powerful magical wand, and throughout countless issues, there's plenty of people who are trying to get their hands on it and trying to actually use it for their benefit. And if you watched my first episode in the one episode of the Spider-Man series that's on Disney Plus and Thrust, the actual only issue or episode, I should say, with Doctor Strange has the main focus of that episode is Baron Mordo is actually trying to use Mary Jane and a whole bunch of other college kids from New York to actually steal the Wanda Watum, and he grants them with powers, and he grants them the visions to see their past relatives or family members or whatever it is, and grants them their biggest wish. So it's just kind of funny that, to me, it's just always being referenced because it is so powerful, and it is such a, I don't want to use the word heirloom, but it is almost like an heirloom because it's always being passed down between sorcerers. And like I said, everybody always steals it. Everyone's always trying to get for it. He also has the Sanctorium, which, yes, like I said earlier, this comic series is actually based off of because of my love for him. The Sanctorium is in New York City. It's 177A Bleecker Street, and if you actually go to 177A Bleecker Street now, or if you Google images on it for that address, it actually comes up with like a little bodega and a like tattoo shop or like tattoo piercing shop, which is really funny because his house in the comics is actually a beautiful mansion in an old colonial Victorian style, which is literally my favorite type of houses. I live in one that's like that. My house is 159 years old, and I literally call it my Sanctorium because it is like I come home and I feel like Doctor Strange. I hang my jacket up like it's the Cloak of Levitation, and then I come up and I sit down and I read some comics and I play some video games as if I was looking into my orb of Vagamato to try to find out what the next threat is. And I come and I meditate a lot in my house, very similar to Doctor Strange. So it's just kind of funny to me that without really trying throughout my years and really like purposely, I didn't purposely buy this house because it was Doctor Strange-esque or or Sanctorium-esque, or I don't do things that are purposely Stephen Strange-esque, but I ended up being and doing a lot of things that were very similar to him and just kind of basing my life off of him because of my deep love for him. I really genuinely think, to me, he's one of the coolest superheroes to ever be around. I mean, guys, he is one of the founding members of the Defenders series. He ends up becoming an Avenger in later. He's one of the founding members of the Illuminati, and without him being in the Illuminati, which is in the Marvel universe, is the smartest minds of all of the universe. So you have people like Reed Richards, Tony Stark are in it. T'Challa is in it, so the Black Panther is in it because of his genius level intellects. They all come together and form this secret group who decide that the Hulk is too dangerous to live on Earth, so they trap Bruce Banner in a rocket, they send him into space, and without the Illuminati deciding that, then you get no World War Hulk story. Which means when Hulk was in space in those movies, you don't get that storyline. And the World War Hulk storyline is the coolest storyline because you get a badass Hulk who rages out and is basically a gladiator and does the movie almost Gladiator, but in space. and he fights Beta Ray Bill, and he fights all these other dope super aliens, I should say, and just really is a great storyline. So without Doctor Strange being a founding member of the Illuminati in the Marvel Universe, you don't get that storyline. You don't get a lot of storylines. You don't get a lot of different things. So, I mean, like I said, he is a founding member of the Defenders. Without him, you don't get the Defenders, which is almost the New York City Avengers. They protect the city. So it's just a really, really great series. Guys, I will always bring him up. I will always reference him. I will always talk about him because my love for Doctor Strange is so large. The reason that I had to do this episode so early is because of who he is and how I feel about him. Is I love this man to death. He's not real. And if you really want to actually sit down, guys, I said it last time and I'll say it this time, sign up for, Comixology or Marvel Unlimited. Definitely sign up for one of the many streaming series of, platforms. Disney has a lot of different great references for you to go off of and watch his movie. And you can really learn a lot about certain characters and learn more and more about certain people. And when you watch these live action movies, you'll have a better understanding and references of things that people are saying. I mean, I watch these movies 4 or 5 times in a row just so I can make sure I pick up on all the Easter eggs, because I listen to each person individually and say, oh, okay, he said that. Oh, this is what he meant by this. Okay, that's where he said that. And then that's when you get those next new movies or references about the people in the universe. But like I said, please sit down, guys, read Doctor Strange, because I think if you get the chance to sit down and actually read some of his first issues, and if you read volume 1 of his storyline, and you go throughout his storyline, you'll really understand the times that the comic books were being written in. So in like the 70s, when Doctor Strange was being written, it's actually a crazy story. Some of the original writers actually used to drop acid and then walk around the New York City like skyscrapers and just go and start freaking out a little bit, but they would write everything down so when they would sober up and go back to their office or their rooms to write, they would have all of these crazy references of crazy colors and schemes. And that's where the Dark Dimension, styled of Doctor Strange came out, where he's in those highlighter colors, the bright popping, and it's all because it was a lot of this was one during the 70s, and you have that 70s style, but at the same time you had dudes who were literally tripping acid walking around New York City, seeing demons walking through buildings and walking around next to people, and they were just literally like, this is crazy, we gotta write this down. And then they put it into the storyline, and here you go. Now you have Doctor Strange who's fighting a demon, and it's almost like it became real because this guy literally sat there and watched it and read it and went, oh yeah, no, this is real, like, to me. So for me, while I read that, and when I read those stories and went back to reading those stories after I found that out, I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. This is really, really different, and it's different than really anybody else is doing. I mean, he's got associations in every kind of concept. He knows all of the superheroes. Him and Spider-Man become friends, very, very good friends, I should say, because Spidey always ends up going to the Sanctum to ask for advice or helping him out. And guys, we're talking about Spider-Man. Spider-Man knows everybody in New York City. Like I said, he's one of those Defenders founding members. And then, yes, he is still a little bit of a misogynistic kind of person. He has a lot of girlfriends and a lot of wives. But for me, Clea, who hopefully is coming out throughout the next movie, that is his number 1 boo. She comes from the Dark Dimension. She is Dormammu's niece. And yeah, so really let's hope that she ends up being in this movie, just because I think if she does, we have a perfect setup to really kind of keep bringing in the concepts of other sorcerers and other people from other beings and dimensions. Although we have Thor Thor's last movie, where you have a lot of the aliens coming and then Guardians coming. That's all just that. Well, now we're starting to introduce you to different dimensions and different universes and all these other realms that are out there other than just Asgard or Earth or Netherworlds or stuff like that. Now we're starting to be like, there's the dark dimension, and then there's a million other dimensions that we can cross over to. So keep open, keep reading, guys. Really, thank you again always for, listening to me, watching, subscribing. Like, subscribe, comment down below if there's any superheroes that you want to know about. If you really want to see more of me and just hear me blab or talk, guys, check me out on Taylor Fitted Podcast. It's on YouTube. There's plenty of episodes with me on it, and there's plenty of episodes with my best friends, Chino and Nick Taylor. Guys, they're probably some of the funniest and best people I know. If you really like Chino, definitely check out his music. Chino B. I'll probably put a link in the description in both for Taylor Fitted and for Chino B. Guys, his music is phenomenal. I don't even listen to Spanish music, and I be bumping his shit every single day. Check him out. Thank you for watching. I'm always gracious. Remember, always shop your local comic shops. Have a good one, guys.